Thanks, Hank. We'll just get started on what we've seen this year so far. In South Arkansas, it looked like we started seeing treatment threshold about mid-July or mid-June. Saw some pretty good infestations on into August. And then we're still seeing some now in September in a few locations. We move up a little bit to the River Valley in Arkansas, and we started seeing those in mid-August. Above treatment threshold in mid-August, something like that. And then you get on over to currently in Boonville, for example, they're having to treat some of their cool season grasses for armyworms that are up and growing already. So there's still some real concern. And kind of what we're going to talk about today is some of the demos that's been going on in some of the studies that Gus has done, and talk about a mix that we looked at. But one theme in general that we've seen with armyworms this year and last year is the fact that we saw some, within an infestation, a lot of mixed sizes of worms. And I'm assuming a lot of y'all saw that, which indicates overlapping or multi-generational, which may mean multiple flights in, things like that. So that's what we were seeing. When you see populations like that, you can expect reinfestations more frequently than every 30 days. And, like every couple of weeks. Y'all know what they look like, obviously, but we should point out there's some good characteristics. The inverted Y, I want to show that. It's a really nice picture that Mary Hightower took. And then the 4 dots on the end of the abdomen. That's enough for the identification. We get asked about where they're overwintering. Our populations primarily overwinter there in South Texas. And then move up towards us. Now, what's going to happen if you have a milder winter down here or on up into here? What do you think could happen? They can overwinter further north. If you don't have the cold enough winters to knock them back. So, in other words, most of our worms generally are going to come from down here and move up. Mild winters, they may move up much further, start earlier. We start out with their life cycle with the adult, right here. Once she emerges, in about 3 days, she's going to start laying eggs. Those eggs, she'll lay batches of 100 to 200, total of about 2,000 possibly during her lifetime. They'll hatch in a couple of days, up to 3 days, into little larvae. Those first little larvae will be about 1/16 of an inch long, really small. During our summers, when we've got a nice warm summer, you're going to look at larval stages being around about 14 days, give or take, around 14 days feeding. So after they're through feeding, that larva is going to be at the 6th instar, and it's going to be about 1.5 inches long. It'll pupate, kind of burrow down a little bit into the thatch, pupate, and then 7 to 10 days or so later, it's going to become an adult. And the cycle starts over again. Another generation. In optimal temperatures, we're talking about a 30-day life cycle. If you're talking about when temperatures cool a little bit, that's going to extend out maybe to 45 days. Sometimes in the literature, depending on where they are, maybe 60. So it lengthens as it gets cooler. As far as the damage, most of that damage is going to occur in the 5th and 6th instar, right in there. That's where most of the grass consumption is going to happen. But to reach that 5th instar, it's going to take about 7 or 8 days. So that last 6 or 7 days are the days that they're really feeding, really eating a lot. And that's something obviously need to keep in mind when we see a population, what those larvae are going to do, the caterpillars. Clues to infestation, especially if you have a lot of small worms. Early on, it'll look like the field is frosted. Sometimes you'll see a field, it almost looks like drought damage. Look for armyworms. Birds feeding in the field, very important. We all see that. And then when it's really bad, you drive by a field and it smells like somebody just cut the grass. And you know they're really going to town then. It's pretty important to scout. But before I start talking about scouting for armyworms, trying to look at how many per square feet, one thing that really works very well is if you have a sweep net, take that sweep net out to the field, you can at least identify the presence of armyworms in the field very quickly with the sweep net. And then go back, if you see armyworms, and try to figure out how many per square foot. So with that said, you're going to examine the leaves very closely, the blades, look down in the thatch, the organic matter, looking for armyworms in an average field, about 10 squares per field. I would recommend putting at least some of those squares out in an area where there's really nice, lush growth. The females like to lay their eggs there where there's nice green grass. When you're counting the worms, keep track of how many are really small, like 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch. You want to keep track of their sizes, because that's going to help make management decisions. You know what size they are. If things are ideal and you go out there and you see your worms, they're about 1/2 inch long. You got a threshold of 3 per square foot, treatment would be justified. But it's not always that simple. If all the worms are nearly grown, like an inch, inch and a half, they may be ready to pupate. In cases like that, oftentimes the damage is already done, and you might not gain a whole lot from an application. You get inch and a half worms. They're going to pupate. I've heard this story from neighbors of mine several times on some of these home remedies that we know don't work. They'll tell me, I went out and sprayed Clorox solution. Worms were 1.5 inches long. 2 days they were all gone. Yeah, they were all gone. They pupated. So keep in mind that they're going to pupate and you won't see them. That's just some scouting. That shows the little square, just PVC pipe, square, digging around in the thatch. And this is just one little spot of one of those squares. And you see some mixed sizes of worms in there. In this picture, I don't see any tiny ones, but there are mixed. So it gives you an idea what you're trying to find. Y'all are interested in control, obviously, but just some general recommendations as far as making an application. You want to use at least 10 gallons per acre of water. That's the minimum. That's if you're doing a ground application. As far as what to use, cutting for hay is a very good option. That is, if the yield is going to justify harvest, you avoid an application. And then you start looking at some of the insecticide options. One thing would be pyrethroids. How many in the room have used pyrethroids? They're like the lambda-cy. They are cheaper, but they don't have the residual activity. Anthranilic diamides and insect growth regulators, and we'll talk about those in a minute. They're the products that are more expensive, but they have longer residual. And there's a little sheet I think they passed out that has a lot of those listed. And then this year and last year we tried to look at some mixtures of pyrethroids along with an IGR. And I think Hank mentioned that earlier. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of all the products. This is what I know of that were used some here in Arkansas. Again, the pyrethroids, probably lambda-cyhalothrin was used more than anything else. And you can understand why. It's $1.50 or 40, it says, to $2 an acre. But very little residual. Same thing with Mustang Max. Of course, it's a little more expensive. Intrepid, that's an insect growth regulator. It has some residual activity, and it can provide 2 or 3 weeks of control. But it's going to cost a little bit more money. I got these prices Friday, and about $6.85 to $14. And that's at the 4-ounce rate, is a $6. In some of the trials that we've looked at in the past, that 4-ounce rate's been pretty good. Then Prevathon and Besiege both contain this chlorantraniliprole. They're going to be more expensive, about $12 an acre on up. And then again, that tank mix we looked at was lambda-cyhalothrin with diflubenzuron or Dimilin. So of this list, what did y'all use mostly?
I had real good luck with the Dimilin.
Did you have it mixed with anything?
If we had worms present, we mixed it. If we didn't, we just sprayed straight.
Just, okay, you sprayed it.
I used Mustang Max and Dimilin both.
Okay,
I put 4 ounces of Mustang Max and 2 ounces of Dimilin.
okay.
Repeat what they're saying.
Oh, we had a couple people using Dimilin with the tank mixing with lambda-cyhalothrin, and then Dimilin without tank mixing if the worms weren't present.
Lambda swells my eyes up shut.
Well, it tends to kind of blister me if I get it on
I
me.
went to the Mustang Max.
Okay,
Repeat what they said from
Okay.
what people said.
Hey Doc, will you talk about the residual days activity on each insecticide?
Will you repeat?
residual days. We've got some of them listed up here, like the pyrethroids. Couple of days, 1 to 2 days, generally across the board. You look at the IGRs, 2 to 3 weeks. Prevathon and Besiege, 3 to 4 weeks. It's important to have products with residual activity, especially when you have those mixed sizes of worms, because you're going to potentially get reinfestation more often. You got moths out there laying eggs more often. So by doing those, you can reduce the frequency of applications to make your crop. Here's some data that Gus generated this summer, and we just show you Besiege, double take, which is Dimilin, lambda-cyhalothrin mix, lambda-cyhalothrin, and the virus. They all got them below the traditional insecticides, knocked everything below the threshold very early on. Even the lambda-cyhalothrin there were a few worms still left early on that it missed. But then you got a reinfestation 14 days afterward, no activity from the lambda-cyhalothrin or the virus, but the other two, the Besiege and the double take, were both below a threshold. Now, of course, this is looking at sweeps. We've got to generate some data to compare sweeps with the squares. Gus and I were talking about that a while ago. But basically what this is saying is you got about 26 days of residual activity with the Besiege and the tank mix of lambda-cy and Dimilin. Enough to make a full crop. Here's one from Lincoln County or Star City last year, again with Besiege, lambda-cyhalothrin. The products work pretty good at 3 days, obviously. Worms didn't reinfest till probably about 14 days. I think he went out and noticed at 14 days, couldn't see them in the plots, but they were all over his legs and feet when he went out to evaluate. So went back 3 days later and made the counts. And again, the Besiege was the one that held out. Went to 21 days. The reason this little study didn't go any further is the hay had to be cut at 21 days after application. We didn't want to interfere with that. Here's a trial from Pike County way back when, where we're looking at some different insect growth regulators, Prevathon and Intrepid. And started out all right about threshold, even though there's numerically different here, they were all statistically the same. So they start out with a similar population, made the application, they all dropped below threshold. The worms started coming back in right in here and maintained the population below the threshold, maintained control. Now, I will mention this, that this Prevathon rate is way low. It's a low rate. It's 7 ounces per acre. Probably wouldn't go that low. Wouldn't want to go that low. But we had some experiences where a low rate looked like it might work. But that 10 ounces is the 2EE rate that most people use. When we're talking about the residuals, how does that work? With the growth regulators, Intrepid and Dimilin, translaminar activity, and you also see that written as systemic, local systemic activity. What that means is you spray the product on the leaf, it absorbs through the leaf cuticle, and there's a reservoir of active ingredient inside that leaf for the worm to eat on and get the insect growth regulator. The diamides are a little bit different. They're absorbed into the leaf, but then they can translocate to other leaves. So you can get the product not just in the leaf that got the dose of the insecticide. So that's how that works. And the pyrethroids don't do that. Yes?
You mentioned about the generic Intrepid, and if that is a possibility and how it will compare to the Dimilin?
Okay. Jennifer was asking about generic Intrepid, and I looked up and found 4 different trade names. I've got a slide at the end that'll provide those 4 trade names of the generic Intrepid. I'm uncertain of the cost right now. I made one call and it didn't make sense to me, so I'm going to have to, but I would expect it to be less, the generics. But there at the one of the ending slides will have those names. Gus knows a little more about them, availability, I think. Yes?
Back to the residual, what happens after you cut the grass?
Cut on the residual activity. What happens after you cut the grass? After you cut the grass, it's gone. It's gone.
Just in the leaves and not in the plant itself?
It's gone. Now, there's not enough with the ones that are insect growth regulators. It's only in the leaves because it doesn't move about in the plant. It just with the diamides, it doesn't go. Not enough goes down into the roots to do anything that I know of. So it's gone.
Also, let's go to text, they're asking questions too. Are all these products that we're talking about right now, are they systemic or is any of them contact, insecticides?
Repeat that.
What he's talking about, the products we're talking about with residual
Right.
are not all it depends on what you call systemic, but the insect growth regulators are local systemic, meaning it's just in that leaf. The other ones are truly systemic, like the chlorantraniliprole. So if that makes sense, but that's how they work. That's how you get the residual activity. This is a question that came about last week. Right now we need to be scouting the fall armyworms if you've got winter annuals coming up. Very important. You want to scout them before they come up. You want to know what's out there. So their new plantings should be up and growing good before you make an application. If you make an application and your wheat's not up, you're not getting any residual activity on that wheat, in other words. But after it's up and growing, you can make an application of product with residual activity. You want it up, up like that. So wheat drilled in the field, Bermuda grass field. It's not up. You got 6 worms, 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch per square foot. So they're the size that are getting ready to eat a whole lot. The wheat's not up, but it may be up in a couple of days. What are you going to do? The cheapest option that would be effective would be something like a pyrethroid, lambda-cyhalothrin, to knock that population down. Then go back after you kill the worms and keep looking. See if you need to make an application once the wheat gets up. And this is another one that actually it was from the guy I bought my hay from. He had a Bermuda grass field. This is in Crawford County. About 3 weeks from harvest, infested with 5 armyworms per square foot, mixed sizes. What is the preferred treatment? My recommendation to him was besiege, Prevathon, or Dimilin lambda-cy mixture. That's what I recommended to him. He called me about 10 days later and said, I've got to treat your field again that I'm going to cut your hay for, and he had to go back and treat with lambda-cy again. And the reason he used the lambda-cy is it's cheaper, and it was the only one he had available locally. But he could have avoided that application. But, he was on top of it. I got my hay. It's all good. This is what Jennifer was talking about, the new Intrepid knockoffs. Troubadour, that's the one I called, and I can't really figure out what they're talking about because one of the numbers they quoted was higher than Intrepid, so I'm thinking something was awry. But when they become available, more widely, obviously before we get armyworms again, we always put these notices out. We'll get it out to you.
I know when you and I spoke last week about the generic Intrepid, if it does become available, you said that it would work better than, because it is an IGR, it would work better than the Dimilin.
Yeah.
Cheaper cost.
Repeat that.
Jennifer was asking me about the generic Intrepid. And the reason I say it would be a better product, it would be a standalone product. You would not have to add the pyrethroid with it like you would with Dimilin. Because Dimilin, you really need to treat with Dimilin when the worms are less than 1/2 inch long, 1/2 inch long or less. They're both insect growth regulators, but Dimilin's a chitinase inhibitor, chitin inhibitor, so it doesn't develop the exoskeleton. Right, so I think I'm trying to get into Gus's time. There's armyworms, and you've got that fact sheet, and this is updated every year. Thank you, and
How big is the moth? What does it look like?
I didn't bring it.
I'm sorry. Repeat that.
How big is the moth and what it looks like? I didn't bring a picture, but it's on that. Did you get that handout? kind of a dusky color, about up to 3/4 of an inch, kind of dusky. I just did not put a picture in this slideshow. I should have.
Kelly, Severe has a question. They want to know if killing worms at the late 5 instar, will that help reduce the population over the next generation?
We can't always count that the worms are going to be coming back in. So if there's damage worth controlling, for instance, if you were talking about L5s, right now, even though the grass is about gone, if they're still an inch long, you may want to kill those before your winter wheat comes up. So if you got something like that to protect.
All right. Another question, and this is from Union County. They want to know if Clorox bleach and Dawn soap are excellent control for armyworms, according to the latest gossip.
No, and that's what I was getting back at with my neighbors. You know, if you got 1.5-inch worms, they're about to pupate anyway, and it makes you think that you killed them when they just pupated.
The next question is, how did you get the sheet with all the prices? They want to know how you got the sheet with the prices.
I called.
You called.
I called Helena, and I called Winfield Solutions.
Okay.
And so what's next year might be completely different. Yes.
Prices are going up.
Yep, prices are going up, correct. Yes, Jennifer.
Can you talk about how much longer you suspect it will see fall armyworm?
How much?
Wise, when you start to see a decline?
Till it gets cold. Oh,
Yeah, repeat.
how much longer will we see fall armyworms? They're fall armyworms, so we can see them in the fall. But what?
That's a good, that's a good,
I'll say a little more, Jennifer, just for you. Obviously, a freeze is going to kill them out. But before that, when you start getting temperatures in the 40s, 50s, you know, really cool, that extends their life cycle.
Are you talking about night temperatures or day?
Night temperatures in the 40s slows them down considerably. Yeah. But like, I think the end of this week, they're saying, I don't know, highs in the 70s, lows in the 50s. So we're still in, but I think we're getting closer. But with that said, we still got to watch the next few weeks, the winter annuals that are coming up.
What has caused the influx so much of the different sizes we're seeing more this year than we've seen in the past?
Well,
repeat that.
what's causing seeing more of the mixed sizes this year than previous years? What likely is happening is you've got multiple flights coming into the area from down south. And then there's some worms that have been here a while. At this stage, you've got another set of moths coming in that are laying eggs in between those two cycles.
Does weather play a big role in that, the wind current?
Wind current, southerly flows.
It's the weather.
Oh, does the weather play a? Yes, it does. The southerly flow has an impact.
I'm gonna have to cut him off there, and we got to hand the mic off to Dr. Lorenz. Let's give Dr. Loftin a round of applause, please.